Welcome.
I'm going to give a few minutes, let everybody join in. I know it's the top of the hour. It's noon time here.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to thank everybody for taking this moment out of their day to talk with us. We know that time is valuable, and we, genuinely appreciate your trust today to talk about this important topic. We really do. I'm just going to give it a minute, Rana.
Yes.
We'll join in.
Thank everybody for coming in. I thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah. All right. So just to get a few things out of the way today, today the topic changed. We had a planned presentation with Rana this week, today, actually. We were planning to do a presentation on mental health because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Yes. And that plan got shifted. We all know that Saturday there was a mass shooting here in Buffalo, on the east side of Buffalo, a targeted shooting, shooting and terrorist event that has rocked our community, challenged the sense of safety for many of us, and has impacted some of us more significantly than others. And it also has opened conversation. There's been an outpouring of support out there. And so today, or I would say Tuesday, I called Rana and said, I know we were planning on talking about relationships and mental health. I think we need to change that. And Rana said, oh, yes, we do. And her first words out of her mouth were, let's talk about trauma. Rana and I know each other from our work at the University at UB School of Social Work. And we've been working together for a few years now, I'd say.
Yes.
And she's also a friend of the program here. She's one of our counselors, here at Child and Family Services, EAP. And, we feel very fortunate to have this relationship. And we also feel fortunate because, we know that we want to hear about trauma. We want to hear about the impact, and we want to hear from you, Rana. Rana is a certified trauma therapist. She is also a social worker. And she has some expertise here to share, and she has important information that we want to share with everybody. I know myself, I've been on the phone with many leaders in the community. We serve over 150 organizations, and I would say I've heard from at least half of them asking me, what can we do? We want to help our employees. And really my message has been kind of a layered approach. People want to do something now, but we also know that a sustained approach is vital in these types of circumstances, and I've asked leaders to do a couple of things. Number one, recognize and acknowledge that this experience is not the same for every one of our staff. Our staff of color have been impacted differently. Our staff that lives in the community where this shooting happened are affected differently. And there are different connections to people that were impacted. And so I ask you to recognize that this is different for some people, and provide latitude and understanding and flexibility and empowerment through choice for your staff. If they need a timeout, give it to them, And lastly, I've asked everyone I've talked to that there is no neutrality, and we have to come out strong as leaders. There is no neutrality on racism and terrorism in our community. And now is the time to hear that from leaders, for everyone. So, and Rana and I have been talking about this even for the last 20 minutes, and she has said if she wants to hear from you,
Yes.
Please feel free to join in on the chat, share information, share questions. I have questions for Rana. Rana and I, kind of compiled this together.
Yes.
And so Rana, let me first ask you, what has your experience been like the last few days?
I just want to say thank you first, Megan, and thank you for embracing me back in 2017, 2018, not just as a professional, but as a friend, and understanding I was new to town and you saw me and we connected right away, and we went right to work as we're doing now. And so I just want to thank you and the organization you represent. I appreciate it. So how I'm feeling, I'm feeling vicarious trauma, but I have an amazing team that I go to for prayer or therapeutic or sound baths or singing and worshiping. We all respond to it differently. I've been doing this work for 30 years. I worked 20 years in gun violence with a company called Life Camp. I'm still working with them. And I believe that this workshop webinar is needed more often, especially to families who experience gun violence on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. So thank you, Megan, for asking that.
Yeah. So help our audience understand, what is trauma? What is, you mentioned vicarious trauma, and I attest to that. I mean, I know that we experience this. Tell us a little bit about that.
When we are the frontline people, we absorb, we engage, we hugging. I hugged so many people over the last 4 days, and we go home and things that we experience growing up, our ACEs, our first childhood experiences are opening up old wounds that may have not been addressed or may have been addressed, but it just opens it up and it stops you. You can become isolated. You start crying, sad, lose appetite because of that immediate emotional response. Even if you wasn't a direct person in the store or on the block, these hearing about it, watching on the news can bring back those ACEs. And it brought it back for me when I hear mothers in the street crying when their children get murdered. It brings it back for me. And because of the great team I have, I was able to move forward and even be here today because I know it's needed. I need it. Talking about it helps me. I embody my work. I embody my work. I use my parenting skills. I use my anger management skills. I use my trauma professional skills on myself first.
Yeah. So taking care of you provides you the latitude and opportunity to help others. What are you hearing from people in this community? I know you've been there. I know you were there Saturday.
Exhaustion, fear, nervousness, worry about resources, worry about cultural competent resources. Because sometimes people don't understand, if you never experience ACEs, which is adverse childhood trauma experiences, people, we were wearing masks. People who experienced trauma were wearing masks way before COVID. Because survival of the fittest, we have to get to work. You gotta take care of the children. You gotta live off the resources you have. But when these things happen, it sets you back. You're starting all over again. And those wounds start to reopen.
So tell me a little bit, what are ACEs again? Adverse childhood experiences. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's when you're under 18 years old and you may have experienced child abuse or neglect, or watched domestic violence, or even a divorce, or moving from your favorite home to a new town. And some of these memories or setbacks or hurts can stay with us, and we become fixated in that stage. And then as adults, we work from that place. We work from that anger. We work from that lack of communication. So those ACEs sometimes follow us if we're not getting therapy at that time of that crisis.
I'm also hearing that it kind of creates a vulnerability.
Totally
And
evolve.
this was a vulnerable community to begin with,
Yes.
you know? Yeah.
And this
How
is why,
does that make it harder to kind of bounce back from this type of event?
and I'm glad you brought that up because when we talked about the relationship special, I was basing that on on post COVID because
Mhm.
relationships took a hit because of the isolation and or too much time together from either with parents or children or partnerships. So it's things like this exacerbates that, exacerbates those type of feelings of isolation and um, shock or denial that you are experiencing something.
I'd say that one of the most consistent things that I have heard from people who were closely connected to this particular incident has been fear. Tell me what that looks like in behavior. You know, how do people act when they're afraid?
I it's so many behaviors that come with that depending on that situation. I know when I work with gun violence, people don't want to come outside.
Yeah.
They're afraid to take the transportation. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid for their children. They have high anxiety. So when parents begin to exhibit these behaviors, their children start to exhibit them. And the first thing, the parent called me and said, "My child don't want to go to school. My child feel alone." A lot of those behaviors stem from what the parents are saying when they hear the news. So this is why the family solution-based services is important because the mom, the child, the grandmother, everybody needs services on how to relate after these type of incidents. Anger is usually prevalent because it's displaced. I'm mad at this person, but when I'm home, I'm gonna yell, I'm gonna scream. It's not a lack of love. It's not about not loving our family. It's about we don't know how to communicate that feeling of being overwhelmed and a lack of resources or no one to talk to about it. So it comes out in anger
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. I definitely can hear that, but I think it's really important for people to see past that anger.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. And that's why I want to bring it up because you have to identify it where it's coming from so it won't be projected onto somebody else, onto our children, onto our family members, onto our community. But
yeah.
we have to identify that is real anger. I'm certified in anger management and I did anger management. I do anger management with the New York State Parole through Life Camp. And the first thing that people don't realize is anger is masked through other behaviors. Anger is masked through crying or depression or isolation or being moody. And we start acting out that anger. But we have to identify what it is first, to identify where it's coming from, call it for what it is, and then decrease through methodologies of breathing, analysis, going back to where it started, bringing up that issue. Sometimes we suppress it, but we're still working from that place.
That place of fear.
Yes, right. Yes.
Because because there's a threat.
Yes.
And I think that's what trauma is. It's a threat to our safety and it
And
threatens us.
and the worst combination, I would say, when I'm working in gun violence and I'm working with the parents and the families, is fear and anger is the worst combination. I have people who went to prison because of that. And when they came home, that is the first thing they said of why they were there. They had fear and anger, and the combination was not good. And we want to decrease that. We want to decrease those type of feelings through emotional intelligence by identifying what I'm feeling so I can name it when I talk to my therapist. I can name it when I talk to my counselor. I can name it when I talk to my parents.
And name it when I talk to my friends and name it when we talk to our kids to teach them,
Yes.
right?
And not be embarrassed. I remember getting trained in 2008 and the facilitator, the leader was, "Rana, you got to work out your anger." I said, "What anger?" And before I can complete the course, I had to go through anger management. And I'm so grateful. Of the 10 years that I taught it, that I was able to not only complete the course and work on my own anger issues, but teach it every day to continue to be reminded of how I communicate with people, how I initiate conversations, my engagement skills are. Because anger management is not about an angry person, it's about how we communicate our message. And our message should be, my philosophy is my message should be communicated through love.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that?
By staying aware and being mindful of how I want to present to my family, my children, my community, my coworkers, my staff.
I'm hearing from you about modeling.
Yeah.
And we're getting questions about strategies, and we're getting questions about how do I help? And I'm hearing from you that what people can do is model emotional intelligence. You know, so what does that look like? What can teachers do? What can supervisors do? What can coworkers do to model this and provide some consistency and stability for the folks that we want to help?
Well, social workers know, and the National Association of Social Workers just implemented cultural humility last year in June, I believe. And what they're really saying in that is, are we critically self-reflecting on our own biases and how we approach and engage people that's not like us? How are we thinking about that? I have a diverse caseload, but I first critically think about the family in front of me. What are their traditions and norms? What are their neighborhoods are like? What are their community conversations are? And I know that sounds like a luxury, but it's the only way we can engage people where they at.
So I'm hearing kind of the first step to providing strategies for others is to kind of do a little self-reflection and understand what could potentially get in the way of help, because you can't help people if you don't have a relationship with them, right? And so how do you do that? Yeah.
It's about the trust. It's about the trust. And the trust is built through starting 101, where they at. But I only can know where they at if I'm using my assessment skills. Our assessment skills as providers are instinct, meaning, and that's why we have to assess ourselves, because if they're not attuned properly, we could assess someone the wrong way and respond to their need the wrong way.
Okay. So how do we assess? What questions do we ask?
How you doing? Giving space. Listening.
Yeah, because what if somebody doesn't want to talk about it?
Yes, giving space and just listening.
Okay.
Giving space and just listening. Being empathetic, thinking about the things when you were in a situation and you needed support, and how did that feel? What did it look like for you? And I always say, start with our families around that kitchen table conversation. Because if we're not having a conversation at home, it is difficult to have it with people outside of your community.
That sounds like a challenge. So you're saying people have to, if you're expecting yourself to be responsive and you're expecting yourself to be able to help people, that you have to start by having these conversations at home.
Yes.
Okay.
Because then it becomes familiar. Then it becomes genuine. Then it becomes a part of my language.
Okay. Because it becomes part of who you are rather than something you're trying to be at work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why mentioned I embody my work.
Yeah.
I get better every day. I do this. I'm getting better right now because I'm teaching this. So I'm applying and adapting to my own strategy, skills, and philosophy. We have to do that as parents because we're modeling, We have to do that as leaders because we're modeling. When I'm training agencies on cultural competence or case management, I have to make sure my paperwork is up to par and I'm greeting everybody the same and understanding where they are. I cannot say something and not do it myself. I shouldn't say it then.
So you're saying, you know, if you're going to teach emotional regulation, if you're going to teach and be present with people, you have to first and foremost do it for yourself.
Yes.
And then second, I'm hearing you have to leverage your relationships with people, and use that relationship with the people we serve, our employees, our coworkers, our students, whomever. And so it's about using that relationship to help provide space to
Yes.
talk about how we're feeling.
Yes, and it's a win-win. It's a win-win. You know, I know everybody see me as the clinician and the therapist, but I also have an MBA in business. And understanding your employees, understanding what makes or encourage their transformational growth, that's a win-win for the company, for the clients, and for the staff.
And taking care of staff is taking care of your business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Certainly something, you know, we've been talking about, you know, and I would argue that the majority of people on this call are EAP members. Yeah. So they have a commitment to that, you know, and we know that, and it's continually sharing that with their staff, that this is important to us, not just today, not just this week, but it's always important to us. And again, reminding people of that is so important, you know. So you talked about having that conversation with family, having this conversation with the people that we serve and the people that we work with. You know, what does that look like? You know, what are things that we can say? What are things that we can do to help educate, maybe sometimes, model sometimes, about emotional regulation, or even what you kind of touched upon, just identifying the difference between fear and anger, and identifying the difference between, you know, how we're feeling from this particular trauma, or from traumas in our history, you know.
And I first for employees, employers, you know, employees, I encourage to advocate for yourself. Okay. I encourage to put the word out if you need a mental health day. I encourage you to talk about your children who may be scared to go to school. I encourage the conversation with your management or your EAP. And for employers to listen and to understand who are you hiring and how the services for your staff, such as EAP, is integrating services to match what your staff problems are. Solutions can't be universal all the time because as I said, agencies don't know about sound baths. You know, agencies don't know about singing and harmonizing as a whole, the Reiki or the holistic way of healing, and some cultures do. So we want to be mindful of, if a person is not going to a regular MD and they went and got a sound bath because it helps put their energy back together, that may be something cultural for them. So we just want to recognize how people are getting help and recognize that they're getting help. You want them to get help in cultural competent ways and not just traditional ways, because problems are not traditional. And these type of problems are not traditional.
Right. No, I really love what you just said about solutions are not universal. That it is really important for us to take an individualized approach. There's no one answer, you know, that each staff member has brings different experiences, different histories, different connectivity to this particular event and this trauma. And that, you know, and one of the questions we're getting here is, so how do you handle that conversation when trust is not there and there is mistrust between the relationship? How do you manage that? You know,
On both sides, on the employee side or the client side, who feel they cannot trust that leader, stay true to yourself. Stay true to what you believe that you're trying to say, because somebody will listen. You know, we say this to children, we say it to adults. I've experienced people didn't listen, and I kept moving and kept going up and around.
okay.
No, and I'm saying it in the most healthiest way, because people who feel stagnated, people who feel they can't trust, they don't know how to. That's another trigger and a trauma and at least listen. And on the leadership side, yes, at least listen. I always was told, you may not get everything answered, Rana, but we're gonna bring you to the table to listen. And it's true. You know, I went for 5 things, I got a half of one. But when I got to the table, and it made me feel liberated, and it made me trust that people were listening to me, and we was able to build relationships.
And I would say 2 things. One, make it easy be accessible. If you're a leader, be accessible, make it easy for staff to come and talk to you. And I also think it's about decreasing your defensiveness and, you know, kind of really putting your ego aside. Because I do think sometimes supervisors and managers take this as a personal assault when someone comes to them and says they're not listening, or it says, you're not being sensitive to me. And the first instinct is to say, yes, I am. Here's how I am. That's defensive, and it is not going to welcome additional details or welcome additional conversation. And, I recommend to folks, put your ego aside, put your defensiveness on hold just long enough so you can hear what someone's saying, so you can hear past the anger or hear past the excuses, and hear past that to what may be fear, what may be traumatic response, and recognize that each person has different experiences and needs. What you said was it's not a universal approach to problem solving. I really like that.
And the last thing, I just want to add that on the National Association of Social Workers also added self-care, and how our companies and organizations are implementing self-care strategies and encouraging self-care. I know agencies that I worked for in the 90s, when I was working 2 jobs, help me get wraparound services if I needed daycare, or listened when I needed to pick up my kid after school that's married now with his family. But I needed that self-care, and they was doing it way before the Social Work Association just implemented. But it's so important to look at our code of ethics and see how we implementing those competencies. And are we trauma informed? Are we inclusive? Are we having the conversation? Are we building trust, as Megan said, with our staff? Companies are doing it. I'm with them. I'm with those companies. They're learning. They're adapting. It's transformational. It's not just transactional.
Tell me about that. What's required for transformation? Because I see a lot of transaction. Here it is. I see a lot of transaction.
Companies that I've been blessed to do consultant work, do the listening, asking about the children, referring to services that's outside of the traditional services. There was staff at one point at one of my agencies who were homeless. They helped them get housing. Like, that's transformational. That's building trust, where that worker now is at work at 6 a.m. rather than 8 a.m.
Yeah.
So those are the things, and it's not about handouts. It's not about, we got to give everybody. It's about understanding the employees that we are employing the leaders and connecting with the leaders and helping them understand where these employees are at, where we at, where I'm at.
Yeah.
I love when my boss or that I'm consulting for, Megan, or my colleagues ask me how I'm doing. Do I need anything?
Mhm. And respecting when someone says, I'm good.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the questions, there's obviously, everybody knows there is an influx of resources coming into Buffalo.
Yes.
The president of the United States was here. We were on national and international news for 4 straight days, the lead story.
Yes.
That has, taken my breath away to some extent.
Never thought he was planning that the relationship.
Yeah, and we were planning a relationship.
Never thought he'd be planning something.
Never would have thought. But we have all these resources, and that's great. People want to feel like they can do something, and I think that's wonderful. So what happens in the months to come now? What happens as we kind of look ahead? What are you hoping for? What is your best hope for this community?
The continuation of coming together, the continuation of unity, the continuation of understanding the oppression and lack of resources that families are living in today's world in Buffalo. When I say lack of resources, I mean from transportation to get to jobs, supermarkets, to food apartheid, things that we would think we would have. And employees are struggling with that. Frontline employees who are caseworkers, who are not at top of the payroll, top of the top line pay, I've seen them on the line getting those bags of food. I've seen them on the line, all those great missions out there giving beautiful bags, packed so nice. Mm-hmm. I've seen employees getting those bags. And I remember being an employee at agencies that helped me put my son through school and helped me pick up my son. That has to continue with families who may be in need. Just support people, support each other.
Yeah. And I'm also hearing the irony is that it's through relationship.
Yes.
That it's through talking.
Yes.
It's through listening. It's through setting aside our own agendas and setting aside our own defenses and really trying to be present with one another to understand one another in a more meaningful way. Yes. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Forecasting like you did, years ago, forecasting that the world is changing. Mm-hmm. And we need more mental health services. We need more culturally competent mental health services. And we need more of that forecasting.
And acknowledging, I acknowledge that, and I've told our staff here, we acknowledge that we can't help everybody. And sometimes people want help from people that look like them. And that's okay to ask for.
Yeah.
It's okay to ask for that. And we encourage people to ask for that. And we want people to know that it doesn't matter how you get the help. We just want you to get it.
Yeah.
And it's through relationship. And through, you put it, love.
Yes. That is my methodology through the critical self-reflection. And I want to answer that young lady's question that I just saw. She said, she don't want her name. And I thank you, young lady, and I will hope your name will not be shown. She's stating that there's no Black staff in upper management. Megan and I talked about that earlier. Yes, and I'm glad you said that. And these are the things that I think Black people are afraid to say. And I don't want them to be afraid. I just want to start the conversation. It's starting the conversation is important. And it's not here today, but some other day. But advocating and understanding what that means when someone says that.
And what I'm hearing there is representation matters.
Yes. Yes.
And, I
I
agree.
told
And we
Megan,
have to say, it's not there.
as I told Megan, I met with Mr. Bond from the president of the American Red Cross. They sent out amazing staff to the Wally Center on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but I also let him know, thank you, but I will also want him in the future to have cultural competent staff to assist those people when they coming into these our neighborhoods and bringing service. And he was very humble and amazing about my conversation with him, bringing culturally competent leaders as well to the community. But again, I thanked him because he was only doing the right thing while trying to adhere to a crisis. But this is what I mean by advocating for ourselves,
Mhm.
going all the way up, going all the way up to the president of the American Red Cross in Buffalo.
And it's current leaders'
Yes,
jobs to make sure that
yes,
those pathways to leadership are available,
yes,
folks, for
yes,
everybody, and for representation
yes,
to occur, because people need to see in our leaders, a representation of themselves, so they feel that they can
yes.
have access to that, right?
Because it made a difference. It made a very big difference because people didn't want to come that way. The people who they didn't come that way. I was there for 3 days,
Mhm.
and if they did, they grabbed and left. It wasn't no community, it wasn't building a community. When you come into a community, you want to build with the community. I went into the crowd, I just hugged people because I can relate. So having someone who can relate to what was going on and not just giving a juice, and that's, it's not to blame. It's just how we want to change and transform how we provide service.
Right, right,
That's all.
right.
And add to what we already have in our infrastructure. That's basically add to what we have already in our fabric.
So kind of as we wrap up here, final suggestions for folks who are feeling scared right now.
Um, First, stop and breathe and assess why you're scared. Is it the present situation? Is it vicarious? Is it the ACEs from when you were a child? We want to be able to know that, because sometimes we don't compartmentalize, and we put everything in one box and just say, I feel awful. We want to, assess, where's this feeling coming from? Because if it's present, we can address the present.
Mhm.
If it's the past, we can address the past. And then it'll help us let stop in breathing and assessing where it's coming from. It helps us identify the words. I'm having panic attacks. I'm having nightmares. I'm fearful. And then we start to break that down. And sometimes we can do it by ourselves if we just stop and breathe. We are our own investigator. We're the best investigator. Even in my private practice, I see people once every 3 weeks because I gave you work to assess for 3 weeks.
Mhm.
You're the best investigator. And that's how they heal quicker. It's not the weekly coming to pull it all out. It's the once every 3 weeks for me, because I'm giving you so much. How are you working it in?
Right, right. We have another comment, kind of, and I'd love to get your kind of take on this. It says, this person is a Black staff member, and right now, recognizing that a lot is being asked of Black staff right now to represent and to answer for their entire race, and to have conversation, and to be responsible for explaining, what everybody's feeling right now in the Black community. And what are your thoughts on that? Because that to me doesn't seem.
It's a normal response when you're not ready. When I was
Okay.
out there the other day, we didn't talk like that, right? Because you were ready, right? So when you're not ready, you don't know. When I was out there at one of the centers the other day, I was asked the same question. They wanted some cameras. I was like, no, we're not going to do that. This is about the people. So we just got to train people on how we want to present and what we want to share. And when I say train people, you advocate. Well, this is what I can share or I can't. Be honest.
So setting the boundaries.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm not talking about that today.
Right.
You know? And also, you know, it's about, you know, us saying today, you know, don't ask your Black staff to represent their community today. You know, don't ask them to explain, and listen when someone says, not today. I need a timeout.
And I think that comes in with the critical self-reflection.
Yeah.
I'm thinking before I approach. I'm not being reactive.
Right. We have a lot to think about right now. I can't thank you enough. And I want to thank the audience for being so attentive, and for everyone for sharing their comments and sharing their time with us. We know it's valuable and we genuinely appreciate it. If anybody has any questions for myself or Rana, we can put you in touch with Rana. Don't hesitate to reach out to us at EAP. The phone number is 716-681-4300. It's our general number. Please call us if you need anything. Go to our website. You can fill out a form. And we're here to listen.
Yes.
We're here to start the conversation. Thank you, Rana. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you to all.
Bye-bye.